5 American wars, 5 families who profited from every single one, not through rumor or conspiracy, but through documented government contracts paid directly by taxpayers. Every conflict, every deployment, every military buildup created a river of money that flowed predictably into the same handful of corporate empires. And while millions died in trenches, deserts, jungles, and ruined cities, these dynasties became richer, stronger, more untouchable generation after generation. This is the part of American history not taught in schools, because it is not about patriotism or ideology. It is about the business model behind war, a model more profitable than oil, more dependable than banking, more protected than any monopoly in U.S. history. It begins with a simple pattern. When war is declared, stock prices surge, contracts are issued, budgets expand, profits explode. War ends, but the money stays. And when the next war begins, the system resets itself automatically. This pattern has repeated for over 150 years through every major conflict: the Civil War, World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, the Gulf War, Iraq, Afghanistan, and dozens of smaller police actions and covert operations. Across all of them, 5 names keep reappearing in the paperwork: DuPont, the explosives dynasty; Rockefeller, the fuel empire; Morgan, the financiers of war debt; Lockheed, the architects of military aviation; Halliburton, the logistics colossus behind every modern conflict. 5 dynasties, 5 industries, 5 pillars of the American war machine. They didn't merely profit from conflict. They built the infrastructure that made continuous war possible. Their factories, banks, refineries, airfields, lobbyists, and political alliances shaped the architecture of U.S. foreign policy, turning war into an economic engine that never truly shuts off. And here is the quiet truth. War profiteering in America has never been an accident. It has always been a system designed, refined, and perfected over generations. Every time Congress votes on a new defense bill, every time the Pentagon awards a no-bid contract, every time a conflict erupts on the other side of the world, the same corporate families reappear collecting value from decisions that ordinary citizens barely notice. This is the hidden structure that links 150 years of global conflict to the wealth of a few American dynasties, and understanding it requires starting at the very beginning with the family that discovered the formula before anyone else, the dynasty of gunpowder itself, DuPont. If there is one family that understood the economics of American war before the United States truly understood war itself, it was DuPont. Their story begins not with a battlefield, but with a chemist standing beside a river in Delaware. In the early 1800s, a man who realized that the future of a young, expanding nation would be written with explosives. Eleuthère Irénée DuPont arrived in America in 1800, trained in the elite gunpowder mills of France. He recognized something most Americans did not: the United States would soon require enormous quantities of gunpowder. Settlers pushing west miners, carving mountains, farmers clearing forests, and a government still defining its borders, all of these forces pointed toward a future driven by controlled destruction. So in 1802, DuPont built his first powder mill on the Brandywine River. It was perfectly placed close enough to Washington for military supply powered by the river, and isolated enough that accidental explosions would not spark political backlash. More importantly, DuPont built capacity before demand existed, laying the foundation for a business strategy that would endure for centuries. Be ready before war starts, and you will be first in line when war arrives. War arrived quickly. In 1812, the United States went to war with Britain, and DuPont was the only American manufacturer producing high-quality gunpowder at industrial scale. The government needed explosives immediately. DuPont had them. A 210-year pattern began here. War breaks out. Government panics. DuPont delivers. profits escalate. Through the Mexican-American War, DuPont secured more contracts, each one reinforcing the company as the de facto national supplier of military-grade explosives. But the true turning point came during the Civil War. The Union's demand for gunpowder reached levels unimaginable in earlier conflicts. Millions of cartridges, artillery shells, naval charges, and engineering explosives. DuPont's mills ran day and night, ultimately producing more than 4 million pounds of gunpowder. The company earned the equivalent of hundreds of millions of modern dollars. And here lies a detail rarely discussed. The DuPont family politically opposed abolition and held sympathies with Southern elites. Yet they sold exclusively to the Union because that's where the money was. Ideology did not guide their business. Profit did. When the Union won, DuPont was celebrated as a patriotic supplier. The contradictions disappeared from public memory. Then came World War I, the moment when DuPont transformed from wealthy to colossal. Before America joined the war, DuPont was already selling explosives to Britain and France. After U.S. entry, DuPont supplied 40% of all Allied explosives. Their profits skyrocketed from $5 million in 1914 to $82 million in 1918, over $1 billion today. With that wealth, they diversified into chemicals, nylon plastics, and industrial materials. The modern DuPont empire, from Teflon to Kevlar, was funded by wartime detonation. And through World War II, Korea, Vietnam, the Gulf War, Iraq, and Afghanistan, the pattern never changed. New wars came, new profits followed. Generations passed, but the business model endured. Today, DuPont family wealth sits around $30 billion, the residue of 2 centuries of conflict. If DuPont supplied the spark that ignited American wars, the Rockefellers supplied the fuel that kept every engine of conflict running. No dynasty in U.S. history mastered the economics of modern warfare more completely than the family behind Standard Oil, a family that understood long before the Pentagon did that every army marches on petroleum. John D. Rockefeller built Standard Oil in 1870 and quickly created the most powerful monopoly America had ever seen. Within a decade, Standard Oil controlled 90% of all U.S. oil, refining an empire of pipelines, tankers, rail cars, warehouses, and fuel depots. The timing was destiny. The U.S. military was transitioning from coal to oil, and Rockefeller understood that whoever controlled oil did not just control energy, but controlled the future of war. By the time the Spanish-American War erupted in 1898, the U.S. Navy had already begun powering ships with fuel oil rather than coal, and Standard Oil became their indispensable supplier. This was the moment Rockefeller realized a deeper truth war for those who refine fuel is the most reliable business in the world. World War I turned this truth into a fortune. Although Standard Oil was broken up by the 1911 antitrust, ruling the pieces ExxonMobil, Chevron, all remained under Rockefeller influence. When World War I began, those companies supplied massive quantities of gasoline lubricants, kerosene, and industrial fuels to Allied forces. But here is the darker, rarely acknowledged fact. Standard Oil also supplied Germany through its overseas subsidiaries, even after the United States entered the war. Neutral countries became conduits. International loopholes were exploited. And the Rockefeller empire profited from both sides of the bloodiest conflict the world had ever seen. After the war, John D. Rockefeller became the first billionaire in modern history, a fortune built significantly on wartime demand. Then came World War II, and the pattern repeated. Standard Oil of New Jersey, Exxon, and Standard Oil of California, Chevron, received enormous government contracts. Fuel was as essential as bullets, and the oil giants delivered. However, the Truman Committee uncovered something explosive. Standard Oil had shared patented synthetic rubber technologies with Nazi Germany through IG Farben, prolonging the war effort. The U.S. government issued fines. No one went to jail. Why? Because the American military could not function without Rockefeller fuel, and through the Cold War, Vietnam, the Gulf War, Iraq, Afghanistan, and countless smaller interventions, the U.S. war machine continued to burn. Rockefeller, descended oil, jets, tanks, carriers, submarines, supply convoys, drones, all of them required petroleum refined by ExxonMobil, Chevron, or their global networks. Even as the Rockefeller family quietly diversified into real estate banking and philanthropy, their fortune remained rooted in the commodity that modern war cannot exist without fuel. Today, the Rockefeller family's combined wealth is estimated at $11 billion. But their influence embedded in banks, foundations, universities, and politics is far greater, and its origin can be traced to one simple truth. The side that wins the war is the side that never runs out of oil. And for over a century, the Rockefellers made sure no one did unless they paid for it. If DuPont weaponized explosives and Rockefeller controlled the fuel that powered every army, then the Morgan dynasty controlled something even more decisive: the money that makes war possible at all. No nation, no matter how patriotic, how powerful, or how threatened, can fight a war without credit. And for more than a century, the bankers of the Morgan Empire made sure that credit flowed through their hands. J.P. Morgan did not build factories. He did not refine oil. He did not operate mills or lay steel rails. He built something far more durable, a financial network capable of underwriting entire governments. By the early 1900s, Morgan's Bank was the most powerful private institution in the United States, the unofficial central bank before the Federal Reserve even existed. The Spanish-American War marked the beginning of Morgan's wartime influence. The government needed fast financing, and Morgan underwrote the bonds. The sums were modest, but the relationship was cemented. When America goes to war, Morgan manages the money. But it was World War I that transformed Morgan from a powerful banker into the most influential financial force on earth. When the war began in 1914, America was neutral. Officially, the government did not take sides, but Wall Street did. Between 1914 and 1917, J.P. Morgan & Co. lent more than $2 billion to Britain and France, roughly $50 billion today. Those loans were used to buy weapons, ammunition, steel ships, and food from American manufacturers. And because Morgan financed the purchasing, Morgan also controlled the distribution of contracts. They became the wartime conduit between European governments and American industry. Then came the unavoidable truth. If the Allies lost, Morgan lost everything. If the Allies defaulted, the American banking system would collapse. Neutrality was no longer financially sustainable. When President Woodrow Wilson asked Congress to declare war in 1917, Senator George Norris famously warned, "We are going into war upon the command of gold." Morgan's loans were secured, his profits guaranteed, and the United States entered history's deadliest conflict with a banking titan positioned to win no matter the outcome. After the war, Morgan profited again by orchestrating the complex machinery of debt repayment. Germany owed reparations. The Allies owed money to America. Morgan designed plans, the Dawes Plan of 1924 and the Young Plan of 1929, rerouted global cash flows, earning Morgan bankers millions in fees while stabilizing Europe. World War II followed the same pattern. Before America entered the war, Morgan banks financed British purchases of aircraft, tanks, and supplies. After Pearl Harbor, Morgan underwrote U.S. Treasury bonds, earning fees as the government borrowed unprecedented sums. Then came the Marshall Plan, $13 billion to rebuild Europe. Much of that financing flowed through institutions tied to Morgan. War, peace, reconstruction, every phase created profit. During the Cold War, Morgan banks financed defense contractors, missile programs, overseas bases, and Pentagon expansions. Korea, Vietnam, the Gulf War, Iraq, Afghanistan, every conflict required Treasury borrowing. Morgan and its successor, J.P. Morgan Chase, helped underwrite it all. The Morgan family may no longer run the bank that bears their influence, but the dynasty's wealth, roughly $30 billion today, was built on the bond between war and debt. DuPont made the weapons. Rockefeller fueled the engines. Morgan made the wars financially possible. If DuPont gave American wars their destructive force, and Rockefeller fueled the machines that carried armies across continents, and Morgan financed the conflicts themselves, then Lockheed Martin provided the most decisive element of modern warfare: control of the sky. Because once war moved upward into the air, into space, into surveillance, into precision strikes, the companies that built aircraft ceased to be manufacturers. They became gatekeepers of American power. The Lockheed story begins humbly in 1912 in a small California workshop where the Loughead, later Lockheed brothers, built experimental aircraft frames by hand. Their planes were fragile, unstable, unreliable, but they were early, very early, and in war, early positioning is everything. During World War I, Lockheed secured small military contracts. Nothing massive, but enough to establish a relationship, the essential first step for any long-term defense dynasty. After the war, while dozens of aircraft companies collapsed, Lockheed survived by shifting to commercial aviation, yet they never severed their military ties. They understood that the real fortune lay not in transporting passengers, but in transforming warfare. World War II proved them right. Lockheed produced some of the most important aircraft of the entire conflict. The P-38, Lightning, the iconic twin-boom fighter, the Hudson bomber, vital for anti-submarine warfare, reconnaissance and patrol craft essential to operations across Europe, and the Pacific tens of thousands of planes rolled out of Lockheed factories. But their true innovation was not aerodynamic, it was political. Lockheed built their factories in strategically selected congressional districts. Every contract meant jobs. Every contract meant local economic stability. Canceling a Lockheed program became politically suicidal. Congress wasn't just supporting an aerospace company. They were protecting their own re-election. This strategy ushered Lockheed into the Cold War as an unstoppable force. They produced the U-2 spy plane, whose reconnaissance shaped the entire U.S. intelligence structure. They built the SR-71 Blackbird, the fastest aircraft ever flown. They built the C-130 Hercules, a plane so versatile and reliable that it remains in service nearly 70 years later. But their financial strategy was even more brilliant: underbid to win the contract. Underestimate costs. Begin development. Declare unforeseen complexity. Request additional funding. Profit from the overrun. The Pentagon, committed and politically trapped, always paid. Then came the 1995 merger with Martin Marietta, forming Lockheed Martin, the largest defense contractor in the world. This wasn't just a company, it was an institution woven into the architecture of U.S. power. Their crown jewel, the F-35 Lightning II, is the most expensive weapons program in human history. Originally projected to cost $233 billion, it has ballooned to more than $1.7 trillion. Oversight committees complain. Watchdog groups protest. But the money keeps flowing. Why? Because Lockheed placed F-35 suppliers in 45 states. Cancel the program and thousands of local economies collapse. War ends. Budgets rise. Lockheed's profits continue immune to peace, insulated from politics, fueled by global tension.